Hello and welcome back, and that is right, today we are comparing NAS. It's the name of the channel after all, it would be weird if we didn't. Today we're looking at the UGREEN series of NAS devices, and we're going to be comparing it against the QNAP series of NAS devices. I've already mentioned this in another video, but quickly summarise. A number of you were wondering when we were talking about UGREEN a few months ago why we weren't comparing it against everyone else at the time, and the reason being was it was only available on crowdfunding, whereas QNAP, Synology, TerraMaster, Acer Store, everyone else was traditional retail. It's not fair to compare the two because no one's coming out of that good. It had to cross the line. It had to arrive with people, which is what is happening right now for backers, but also that it had to reach traditional retail, which UGREEN say is going to be very, very soon. Which brings us to this video. We're going to help you decide by the end of this video, hopefully, let's call it 20-25 minutes, help you decide which one of these two is best for you and your data. We're going to break it down into price and value. We're going to break it down into hardware, both inside and out. We're going to talk about the software, and we're going to talk about support and warranty. And hopefully by the end, you'll have an answer. But let's crack on with that value. Let's talk about the old Wonga. Right now, unlike a comparison I did between UGREEN and Synology, the boundaries and price point between UGREEN and QNAP is actually a little bit closer to the mark. Now, when UGREEN rolled out, it rolled out on crowdfunding with an enormous early backer discount. They said 40% than the RRP they were suggesting. We all know RRPs are ever so slightly higher than what things are actually going to be. But even then, the 2, the 4, the 6, and the 8, and the 4-bay flash model, all of them were arriving at a price point competitive to the entire industry. No one was hitting that price point for that kind of value in a NAS server. The 4-bay flash system was about 470 Nika. A 4-bay flash system, M2 NVMe, Gen 4 and i5 with 10 GBE and Thunderbolt for 479 was unchuffing beatable. But its RRP was 799, which again, even then, was still better than a lot of people out there. So in terms of the price point and the value, if we look at it at the crowdfunding pricing, which are obviously long gone, those prices were fantastic. But even the standard prices that the UGREEN NAS systems are going to roll out the gate with are going to be very, very competitive in terms of price for hardware. Now, in terms of the price of QNAPs, QNAPs are more expensive. They are, whether it's the value series going into the 2s, the 4s, the 3s, the 4, the 5, the 6, the 9 base, the 8 bay, the 12 bay. They've got a hell of a diverse portfolio, more on that in a moment. But QNAPs are generally more expensive. They have, I would argue, a better balancing act between hardware and software than the likes of Synology, who go for a 60-40 in favour of software. QNAP used to be 60-40 in terms of hardware, but they found that balance a little better in recent years. But still, there are a higher price point for most users, but I would argue the value of the hardware is better than that of a Synology, and on par and getting on the same wavelength to the young upstart that is UGREEN. The diversity of the hardware, the diversity of a lot of the peripherals, the connections, the options, the upgrades, it's just generally felt a great little price point there in terms of the hardware, and it's what's drawn a lot of users to QNAP and that 20 years they've been in the biz. I know I'm going to mention the years a lot, and it's worth highlighting 12 to 14 years UGREEN have been around, but in NAS, they've been in NAS for less than a year, technically, outside of the East, key point there. But in terms of price point there, the UGREEN still win in terms of price for the hardware, but the diversity of that hardware that we're going to talk about in a moment may be what tips the scale for you in terms of how much you're willing to spend. Now, in terms of hardware between the two of them, it is a question of diversity versus simplicity. Now, UGREEN arrives again in that 2, the 4, the 6, and the 8 SATA configuration and the 4-bay little flash system, arriving with 3 different CPU configurations in the Intel N100, which is basically a Celeron but not. The i5 system, which is a 10-core Intel CPU there, 12th generation, and a 5-core Pentium CPU. Also, it arrives with Thunderbolt connectivity, arrives with 2.5 GBE and 10G connectivity. Number of ports change from system to system. An SD card slot built there into the front, and some of the larger systems do have PCIe upgrade slots that you use third-party cards to install in there, and most of the systems have M2 NVMe slots on the base that can be used for caching or storage. Now, In the case of QNAP, all of the CPUs I just mentioned are available on QNAPs in one shape or form, but they have other CPUs as well. They've got Realtek ARM CPUs from Annapurna, Marvell, Realtek. Then they've got Intel Celeron CPUs. They've got Intel Atom CPUs, Intel i5, i3, i7, i9 CPUs in their configurations. With this system supporting DDR5 memory up to 64 gig on every single system, and 32 and 64 depending on the CPU. On QNAP, all of their systems, the diversity of CPU and memory combinations from DDR3 to DDR4 to DDR5 to ECC to non-ECC with on-die, there's a huge degree of variety in the hardware configurations afforded to you. Also, remember 2, 4, 6, 8 and 4-bay flash. Their systems, as alluded to earlier on, is an enormous diversity of hardware configurations afforded to you for 2.5, 3.5 inch SATA. There's SAS systems, U.2 systems, M.2 NVMe systems. There's huge varieties of configurations on their platform. Alongside that, although both of them have got Thunderbolt solutions out there in the wild, only QNAP currently supports QNAP to network bridging. It means that you can directly connect your Mac or Windows system via Thunderbolt to the QNAP NAS and edit directly on it, like you would on a connected Thunderbolt storage drive. And now that's even doubled down upon at Computex recently, when QNAP have now rolled out SMB multi-channel support on that Thunderbolt connectivity. What that ultimately means is you can connect 2 Thunderbolt cables from your PC or Mac system, PC probably more likely first, onto this system over SMB, enabling SMB3 or multi-channel, and it will effectively double up that performance, going from between 1200 to 1500, then scaling up to 2500 and more. It's very, very, very appealing. And with 10 GBE, 25 GBE, 100 GBE connections and upgrade cards available on the QNAP platform, it has to be said that diversity of the hardware from QNAP overshadows UGREEN's offering significantly. We have to still, factor in 20 years versus less than a year in the biz, technically, again. But in terms of hardware, QNAP wins for me. But when it comes to the price for that hardware, once again, UGREEN is still offering you better value for that hardware overall. And onto the software. As you can see here on the left hand side, we've got QNAP's QTS 5.1 software, and on the right hand side we've got UGREEN's UGOS software. And I'd say between the two of them, unsurprisingly, the QNAP has got more apps and features. I'm sure I've already touched on that in the first half of this video, but I'll say right now, between the two of them, unlike my DSM versus UGOS comparison, there's actually a little bit more crossover between these that we need to talk about. The user experience right now, we got them side by side. Normally you would have either one of these full screen, but I'm halving it so you can see both side by side. And if we look at the zoom, we're running right now them at 80% zoom each. Let's zoom back in, 80% zoom, and I would say the kind of size of the icons between them is pretty darn similar, but the layout of those icons, they've gone for a very standard Windows experience there, even right down to the weird shape of Windows 11 there in the background on the UGREEN. And the QNAP side, they've maintained that kind of slightly Android feeling. Now, the first thing we have to talk about is client tools. Unsurprisingly, QNAP have been in the business now for 20 years. In that 20-year period, they have done a lot, and they have a lot of apps. I would argue they have got more apps on their platform than anyone else. And with that, there's a lot of overhead. There's a lot of first-party apps, a lot of third-party apps, there's surveillance apps, there's backup apps, the virtual machine applications, network and tunneling applications, multimedia applications, AI photo recognition applications, third-party apps like Plex and Tailscale. You've got cloud synchronization application, Google Photos application synchronization. You have, quote-unquote, a lot. But UGREEN have taken things forward a little bit since we originally reviewed their software when it was during the beta phase of their crowdfunding campaign. Now, they've added a few more apps there. They've now got their virtual machine tool there. So you've got a virtual machine app if you want it. You've got a Docker application there. The virtual machine tool, a little bit simplified, I would argue. It's not as densely, richly packed as virtualization station on the QNAP. But again, at least they've got it on there. On top of that, you've got the Docker application for adding those smaller container environments. We utilized it in a recent video. We were installing Plex Media Server on a UGREEN NAS. But just keep in mind that on QNAP, you've just got the client app. You don't need to use Docker. It's just there. And you're going to hear a lot of things like that when we look at things such as the backup and synchronization tools. UGREEN have since added a couple of different apps there for backup and synchronization. The Sync and Back tool allows you to back up elements and data from third-party NAS systems onto the UGREEN and vice versa. But currently, a lot of it is still very much in beta, still coming soon there. And it has been a whirlwind campaign for UGREEN. But even now, with the users now receiving their units from that crowdfunding campaign, there are just elements that are still absent there. And the same goes if you want to synchronize with a cloud platform. For the UGREEN side, it's the NetDisk tools. You open it up, and currently at launch, you've only got support right now for just Microsoft OneDrive. So there's no Google Drive, there's no Dropbox, there's no one of a plethora of cloud storage platforms supported there. It's nice to have it, but it still feels like it needs a bit more time in the oven there. Now, when we move over to the QNAP side, obviously 20 years in the biz, they've already got a lot of those things in place. When it comes to a lot of their backup and synchronization tools, when we look at them, Hybrid Mount allows you to bolt on cloud storage to make it appear like it's local storage, making your Google Drive to be treated like it's a local QNAP logical drive. Then you've got things like Hybrid Backup Sync 3, a multi-tiered backup application that we talked about many times, that not only has a synchronization with a plethora of cloud platforms in both directions, but also allows for different kinds of synchronization jobs and Apple Time Machine backups and more. You've got Virtual JBOD that allows you to bolt on other NAS storage. Again, not dissimilar to that of what we've seen of Hybrid Mount. You've got that Mars application to back up to, say, Google restore and retrieve data from Google Photos, WordPress databases, and more. It's an incredibly detailed selection of tools. And I haven't even talked about QSync that allows you to install an app on different Mac, Windows, iOS, Android, and Linux servers that allows you to create shared team folders between all of those devices, whereupon you never have to use the QNAP user interface. You could just use your native file explorer and let the app in the background take care of synchronization and backups. There's just a lot of fully featured tools here that are thanks largely down to that 20 years in the industry that UGREEN are now going to have to spend either 20 years catching up on or have to do it very quickly in a modular fashion. And I think what they've opted for is the second option. Is that bad? Not necessarily, but it is going to lead to a slightly more inconsistent experience. I feel like I'm really ragging on the UGREEN software. I don't mean to do so. I understand this is a slightly newer, greener company and a more affordable product. This is their launch product into this sector, and I've got to be fair with them on that. However, you've come to this video because you were thinking about buying a QNAP or a UGREEN NAS. And when it comes to the software, the QNAP software is just a lot more diverse, and I would argue even more customizable than the UGREEN side of things. Now, when we look at the multimedia applications on offer, multimedia apps and services on the QNAP side, you have got those apps for videos, you've got the apps for photos, you've got the apps for music, you've got the apps to stream to those third-party multimedia servers as well, alongside their own AI-powered recognition tool. We've made videos on almost all of these apps and services. UGREEN's offering there, again, just feels a little bit, we nailed the fundamentals, but it's still a work in progress. Their Photos app there, great stuff. I would argue in some respects, their photo app is actually better than the QNAP offering. The QNAP offering has object and thing recognition, it's got facial recognition and share tools, but the UGREEN side actually rolls in with an improved AI selection with person recognition, object recognition, scene recognition, sensitive content recognition, pet recognition, image recognition, OCR or text recognition, deduplication recognition, not deduplicate, duplication, duplicate image deletion there. Ultimately, it's still a better tool on the QNAP side, But you can't say that UGREEN isn't showing tremendous willing on what they're doing there. And the same goes for the music apps and the video apps. There is the scraping of metadata options built into the UGREEN video application there. The music app is actually pretty darn good for streaming that audio. And I think the QNAP side, sometimes one of the things that QNAP does that I've criticised them for in the past is they have a tendency to have too many apps and then not support them long term. And they end up with too many SKUs running, which leads to its own inconsistent experience. But then they counter it with tools like Multimedia Console, which is just incredible, and it has got so much love, attention and detail that it almost, but not quite, makes up for when I see things like their HDMI output being so massively overlooked all the time. It's still a better experience than the HDMI output on the UGREEN side, which only outputs a single screen of multimedia that you control with your phone. And the QNAP side has a range of applications and the QNAP Club to add even more apps, but it still is an app that QNAP have largely abandoned in terms of updates, at least compared with all the other apps and services they include. Now, things like the iSCSI and Fiber Channel, the ability to create those dedicated storage targets and LUNs that can trick your operating system into thinking the NAS is local storage, that still isn't here on the UGREEN side. The network management tool is better on the QNAP side. When you want to manage your network on the UGREEN, you've got pretty much the defunct basic options. And let's talk about security. That is a big one. When it comes to security on QNAP, it's one of the areas they've been criticised for more in the past than anyone else. But I would still say that their management and security options are better than UGREEN currently. UGREEN doesn't even have two-factor authentication right now. I know they're looking into adding it. I know they are. But I would have liked to have seen two-factor authentication on day one. And it's not there. Whereas on the QNAP side it is. And then we can talk about the security monitor that your QNAP system arrives with. There is a dedicated security overview panel that you can run on your QNAP NAS that has antivirus built in, manages your firewall intelligently, and runs system scans periodically telling you where the weaknesses in your system can lie, weak passwords, open port, SSH enabled, and more. The only thing you get on the UGREEN side when you go in is anti-malware, antivirus. You don't really have any of those system scanning protocols. Don't get me wrong, I like my data may be protected from viruses and malware, and that my data has been scanned periodically for that. But in 2024, ransomware is the big enemy, and I want to know that I don't have an opening, an available attack vector that can be exploited by a hacker, and then who can get into my system, encrypt all of my data, delete the original data, and then leave me a little note saying, pay us the money, we'll give you the key, or you lose your data. Hackers don't want to destroy the NASs anymore, except for businesses and widespread DDoS attacks and stuff like that. When it comes to servers of private homeowners, they want you to still be able to access your system, just not your data. And the lack of, write once, read many support on both of these is a real bummer, although I would argue the encryption levels and control on the QNAP are significantly higher than that of UGREEN. Ultimately, the UGREEN UGOS software is good, is responsive. I'd like to think this video has shown that. But the QNAP side has got literally decades of experience behind it, which you can see in a lot of the apps and services. It's a little bit overstuffed. I would argue they could maybe put a broom through it a few times. And UGREEN starting afresh have got the potential to only add the fundamentals and things people actually want. But they're not quite there yet. And right now, if you want a fully featured NAS experience between QNAP and UGREEN, at least in terms of software, you're going to get more from the QNAP. Just keep in mind that it is still in its own way going to have its own hurdles. It's going to be a larger, more intimidating presence than UGREEN gives you currently.
Help, I need somebody help, not just anybody.
Now, when it comes to software support, warranty, that sort of thing, I would argue QNAP do make a very strong case. They have got more locations globally around the world. They have got, let's be honest, more solutions and knowledge bases out there for people to access. There is more user experience dealing with their warranty for good or for bad. And ultimately, they have a wider degree of availability for their solutions for replacement, repair, warranty, support, technical support, and more than arguably UGREEN is going to have. UGREEN is a big company, but again, the majority of their company is centered around peripherals, power adapters, docking stations, and not NAS. The NAS support network, maybe they've beefed up, maybe they've tooled up, but they don't have the global support that QNAP does, and they certainly don't have the global knowledge base at people's fingertips. Now, during that crowdfunding campaign, we've got loads of evidence. We've got loads of evidence of them responding or not responding to people. We've got lots of evidence of people now receiving their units, for good or for bad. Again, there will always be failure rates on any system because that's just mass production for you. But we still don't have enough evidence to say that their support and warranty network is going to be the same as QNAP. Now, we have to be fair. QNAP ain't perfect. Like any brand, they've got their good stories and their bad stories. Hell, we talked about Deadbolt plenty, haven't we? But there's still no denying that if you are going for a solution and you want to know there is a robust established support network, QNAP has got more players on the field right now. And I think if that's really important to you and perhaps your business data, that's going to make a big difference to your decision between these two devices. And there you go. I think the big takeaway from this, you've probably already worked out, better value for money in terms of hardware. Indeed, not only that, but if you're going to go for third-party operating systems anyway, even though both of these systems, and by both of these systems, I mean the entire gamut of the ranges of both brands, you can install TrueNAS or Unraid, etc., or Open Media Vault, whatever, on a lot of both of their systems. Only this one allows you to do it and also maintain your hardware warranty. QNAP have made it abundantly clear they don't support it and they won't allow you to utilize that on their systems and maintain the same support network that they offer to customers that use the system the way they have promoted. Also, I think once you reach the 8-bay scale, so between 2 and 8 bay, and you want a prosumer device, UGREEN offer a better arrangement of hardware solutions to meet that customer need in terms of hardware value. Again, even the most modest systems have got 2.5 GBE and the N100 CPU there, DDR5 at 8 gig that can scale up to 32, and SD card reader slots. Just generally, the value of their 2 and the 4 bay base level N100 model is pretty darn competitive. And once you reach the prosumer Pentium and i5 powered 4, 6 and 8 bay devices that have got PCI upgrade cards, that have got 10 GBE upgrade slots, that have got Thunderbolt connections, nothing on the QNAP portfolio can challenge that hardware price point for that configuration. But after that, it's a very different story. QNAP side of things, you have a better diversity of hardware configurations beyond that. You have better upgrade cards. Again, we've mentioned the 25 GBE, 100 GBE, 10 GBE combo cards, M2 NVMe upgrade cards on Gen 4. The works. They just have a greater diversity of hardware, expansion boxes, hardware RAID and JBOD expansion boxes. Hell, Computex a few weeks ago, we saw them unveil a USB Type 4 JBOD expansion for desktop and mobile. We saw desktop and rack mount. We saw them roll out little adapters for USB 4 to 10 GBE with plans for a 25 gigabit Ethernet to USB 4 bus powered adapter. You're not going to get that from UGREEN. So just keep in mind that although at that 2 to 8 bay level, the hardware is a better value and a better arrangement point for that price point on the UGREEN, outside of that bubble, and I mean under that as well in the value tiers, QNAP is offering way more. Also, their software is more fully featured, and although it isn't as smooth as that as Synology's platform, I would argue QTS and QUTS give you more than what you find on the UGREEN system as it stands in UGOS, but things may change. Ultimately, a better user experience, I would argue, is to be found on the QNAP, at least in terms of the feature-rich environment, than on the UGREEN, but the UGREEN is one to watch. They aren't going to stop with this. Everything about the OS, everything about the presentation of this system has indicated this is the start of them really stretching their muscles. So if you're watching this video 6-12 months into the future, maybe the outcome has changed somewhat. I hope you found this video helpful and your questions have been answered. There should be a link in the description to a written article on this very subject. There's also links to reviews that we've done for numerous UGREEN and QNAP NAS systems, so I recommend you check them out. And lastly, if you found this video helpful, very important, and if you were going to shop at any one of the shops listed in the description, make sure those things are true, because if that's the case, please use those links to purchase your UGREEN or QNAP NAS. It really helps what we do here. It costs you nothing extra, and we get a tiny little bit of percentage back, which helps us keep doing what we do. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.